Hello and welcome to the World Today, everyone. I'm Richard Nta in Nairobi. Let's begin with our top story. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called on the international community to increase its support for the United Nations Charter at a time of global geopolitical and economic uncertainty. Wang made the remarks while presiding over a Security Council high-level meeting on strengthening the UN-centered international system. He also outlined China's key role in upholding multilateralism. Mitch McCann reports from New York.
Tuesday's Security Council meeting was titled Upholding the Purposes and Principles of the UN Charter and Strengthening the UN-centered international system, a theme China has promoted during its previous presidencies. The meeting comes at a time of great volatility in many parts of the world, including Iran, Ukraine, the DRC and Sudan, and amid concerns that the world's strongest powers are failing to uphold both the UN Charter and international law. Before China's foreign minister spoke to the Council, the UN Secretary-General outlined a list of challenges the Council is currently facing.
We are witnessing a dangerous erosion of respect for international law. Core principles, sovereign equality, territorial integrity, political independence, the prohibition of the threat or use of force are being challenged or ignored. Violations go unanswered, and impunity is spreading.
Wang Yi then addressed members in the Security Council chamber, where he said that the world's major powers have a responsibility to lead by example in following international law and not practice double standards.
The root cause of the chaos in today's world is not that the Charter's spirit is outdated, but that the international order and the basic norms governing international relations both set out in the Charter are not being effectively upheld and observed. The international community should recall the founding vision of the Charter, carry forward its spirit, and fulfill the obligations under it.
The Security Council also heard from Pakistan's foreign minister, who highlighted the role his country is playing in resolving the conflict in Iran. He told members that a prolonged conflict would serve no one and would endanger peace, disrupt global energy flows, and deepen humanitarian suffering. Following the morning session, Wang Yi met with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres before addressing members of the media.
China has been working diligently to de-escalate the current conflict. President Xi Jinping has put forward a four-point proposal pointing out the direction for maintaining and promoting peace in the Middle East. We have maintained communication and coordination with major parties concerned, as well as international, important regional and international partners. We believe that the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of all countries in the region must be respected. Civilian and law and non-military targets must be protected. The security of passages and energy infrastructure must be safeguarded, and the provisions of the nuclear non-proliferation regime must be implemented.
He underscored the importance of a United Nations that is able to withstand challenges to multilateralism.
We hope international relations won't return to the law of the jungle, and we all need to uphold the same system. That is the international system with the UN at its core.
While in New York, Wang Yi will also attend a meeting of the Group of Friends of Global Governance on Thursday and is also set to meet with other foreign ministers before flying to Canada for more diplomatic engagements. Mitch McCann, CGTN, at the United Nations in New York.
China's foreign minister has also met with his Indonesian counterpart, Sugiono, on the sidelines of the UN Security Council meeting. Wang Yi called on China and Indonesia, as representatives of the emerging economies and major developing countries, to strengthen cooperation and jointly uphold the authority of the United Nations. He added that they should also inject stability into a changing world and contribute towards addressing global challenges. Wang went on to say that China is ready to work with Indonesia to intensify high-level exchanges, strengthen multilateral collaboration, and promote greater development of bilateral relations. Sugiono said Indonesia will provide a favorable business environment for Chinese enterprises, work together to enhance cooperation, and promote regional peace, stability, and inclusive development. The two diplomats also exchanged views on international and regional issues. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has met with his Bahraini counterpart, Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al Zayani, on the sidelines of the UN Security Council high-level meeting in New York. Wang says China hopes for the immediate return of peace and tranquility into the Gulf region and the Middle East. He reiterated China's support for mediation by Pakistan and other countries. China is ready to coordinate closely with Bahrain and other UN Security Council members to ensure the Council remains on the right track towards a political settlement and lasting peace in the region. Zayani said Bahrain appreciates China's efforts to promote a ceasefire and peace and hopes China can play a greater role. Efforts to end the war against Iran are in doubt after the United States launched strikes on Iranian targets near the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran has criticized the attacks, accusing the U.S. of violating their ceasefire. Washington says the attacks were defensive in nature, targeting missile sites and boats attempting to lay mines. Walter Morris reports from Washington.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says despite diplomatic efforts, a deal to end the war could take a few days. And Tuesday, Iran said it reserves the right to retaliate after the U.S. launched fresh strikes against several targets in the region. U.S. Central Command says it carried out defensive operations against missile launch sites and mine-laying boats in the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM says the latest attacks were designed to protect U.S. troops from threats posed by Iranian forces, and state media reported several explosions in a southern province. Following the strikes, Iranian military officials said they had downed a U.S. drone and fired at a fighter jet that had entered Iranian airspace over the Gulf. In a Telegram channel, Iran's supreme leader issued a strong warning to U.S. allies in the region, saying, quote, "The clock cannot be turned back and they will not be a shield for American bases." Before the recent strikes, both countries said there was progress on a memorandum of understanding that would stop the war and restart shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The memo would give negotiators 60 days to figure out more complex issues surrounding Iran's nuclear program. U.S. officials say reopening the strait is a key objective. The strait has effectively been closed since the war began in February, leading to a global energy crisis. Iranian officials have been engaged in talks to reopen the strait with mediators in Qatar. This week, U.S. President Donald Trump said the negotiations in Doha were progressing nicely. And during a visit to India, Secretary Rubio said the strait will reopen one way or another.
So they need to reopen. What's happening there is unlawful, it's illegal, it's unsustainable for the world, it's unacceptable. I don't know of any country in the world that does it. The straits need to be open, unimpeded, without tolls, and obviously that needs to happen immediately as soon as anything's agreed to.
Walter Morris, CGTN, Washington.
Tasnim news agency reports that Iran wants the U.S. to release $24 billion of its assets that have been frozen overseas. Tasnim says that an Iranian meeting with Qatari mediators in Doha sought to finalize a mechanism to free the frozen assets. The demand is part of a 14-point memorandum of understanding between Tehran and Washington. Tasnim says Iran wants half of the amount to be made available upon the announcement of the memorandum and the rest transferred within 60 days. It says the Doha talks were generally good and led to progress in the overall negotiations. The Iranian public has expressed doubts over a potential peace deal with the U.S. Many cite Washington's unilateral withdrawal from the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, otherwise known as the Iran nuclear deal, as a cautionary tale. The historic accord lifted sweeping economic sanctions on Iran in exchange for strict, verifiable limits on Tehran's nuclear program. But Trump pulled the plug during his first term.
The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was one example. The U.S. went back on everything. This is the same. There is no difference. Trump's contradictory statements have made it clear that there is no commitment to any word. There should not be an agreement, but I don't think there will be a war either, because they have paid a huge price and they are frightened. With this Strait of Hormuz of ours, we are worse for them than 100 atomic bombs.
This account that we have from America, and everyone is familiar with, is by no means trustworthy, and great vigilance is necessary. They must be careful and consider the possibility that the same fate of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action might happen again, that it might be invalidated, or in other words, might be torn up.
In my opinion, there can be no agreement because the demands of both sides are very far apart, and if they were to reach an agreement, it would mean that all this war and campaigning would be useless, and America's hegemony would be called into question, and none of the goals for which it took this great action would be achieved.
I don't want war because it hurts people. People's homes are destroyed. People lose their lives. They lose their loved ones. On the other hand, I don't want anyone to force us. This is our land, and I love Iran. I want us to be in a stable situation and everything to be peaceful.
Israel says it has killed Hamas's new military chief, Mohammed Odeh, in a Gaza strike. Defense Minister Israel Katz's announcement comes 11 days after the death of Odeh's predecessor, Izz al-Din al-Haddad. Gaza's health officials said 3 people, including a woman, were killed and more than 20 others wounded in the attack on Gaza City's Rimmel neighborhood. There has been no immediate comment from Hamas. Our correspondent Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
It happened last night. As soon as there were news of strikes in Gaza, it took only minutes for a statement coming out of the defense minister and the prime minister saying that the target is Mohammed Odeh, that new leader of Hamas in Gaza, who's only been in his post for 2 weeks following the killing of the previous leader, Izz al-Din al-Haddad. He was killed 2 weeks ago. And then this morning came the news that it's confirmed the new leader was killed, first from Palestinian sources, then from Defense Minister Israel Katz, then from the Army and the Internal Security Agency. All of the indications saying that he was killed. So Israel confirming the killing this morning.
Well, that is it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
The Democratic Republic of Congo and neighboring countries step up Ebola response measures, with the World Health Organization warning the outbreak is rapidly spreading. South Africa warns anti-migrant protesters against propagating violence and lawlessness as some countries continue to evacuate their citizens. And Ghana becomes the 5th country to allow African passport holders to enter the country visa-free. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Coming up in business, Muslims in Mali battle high costs of sheep as they observe the festival of sacrifice. And in sports, we'll have the very latest news ahead of the upcoming FIFA World Cup as Algeria's players begin to gather for a pre-tournament camp. Once again, a very warm welcome to Africa Live. We begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where an Ebola outbreak is rapidly spreading. The World Health Organization says the number of suspected cases has surpassed 900 and 220 deaths are linked to the outbreak. Aid agencies are rushing emergency supplies to affected regions, even as fear and mistrust complicate efforts to contain the virus. CGTN's Caroline B. now reports on the virus that has no approved vaccine yet.
In eastern DRC's Ituri province, fear is spreading almost as fast as the Ebola virus itself. On Tuesday, health workers in the city of Bunia gathered to bury a prominent local doctor who contracted Ebola while treating patients, a grim reminder of the growing dangers facing frontline healthcare workers.
We are indeed afraid, but we cannot abandon the sick because we are afraid. We have taken an oath. We will treat them, but while respecting the preventive measures. The epidemic is here, and to avoid it, the first thing is to break the chain of transmission.
The UN says the DRC response is being hampered by insecurity and limited access to remote communities.
Funding remains urgently needed, as well as sustained and safe access, so that responders can be protected from the Ebola virus, so that they can provide protection and care to affected communities, and to allow humanitarian teams to deliver aid and a full package of healthcare services to the communities in need.
Congolese health officials say misinformation and distrust remain major obstacles. Some communities believe Ebola is caused by mystical forces rather than human contact, making prevention efforts even harder.
It is still very difficult to convince people that this disease is transmitted through contact and that it's dangerous to touch the patient or the body because it's contagious. Another resistance which has greatly decreased is a belief that this was a mystical disease.
Meanwhile, international partners are stepping up support. The European Union and UNICEF have sent 100 tons of emergency supplies, including protective equipment, medicines and testing kits, to help contain the outbreak.
We will be able to help the people in that region who are largely dependent on humanitarian aid, 5 million people, most of whom rely on humanitarian aid, including about 1 million displaced persons spread across some 60 camps. This gives you an idea of just how much of a daily challenge it is to control this epidemic.
WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus is traveling to the DRC as health authorities race to contain the outbreak before it spreads even further across the region. While doctors and healthcare workers on the ground admit they are frightened, they say they cannot walk away. They say stopping transmission and rebuilding public trust may be the only chance of bringing the epidemic under control. Caroline B., CGTN.
To further discuss the Ebola response, my colleague Panina Karibe spoke with Dr. Jean Kaseya, the head of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. He started by talking about why it took so long for specialized international agencies to detect the latest outbreak in the DRC.
Officially, the first alert came on the 5th of May. But this alert was tested in Ituri with a cartridge that was for Zaire, you know, we have some strains. The strain that we know more is Zaire, that is killing more than other strains. When they tested Zaire, it came negative. They were thinking that it was not Ebola. Later, when we had other cases, they sent samples to Kinshasa, and in Kinshasa, it was on the 14th that they discovered it was Budibungyo, and on the 15th, when I got evidence that also Uganda had cases, this is why Africa CDC declared this outbreak, followed by the government of Uganda and DRC.
The World Health Organization has warned that the latest Ebola outbreak is outpacing response efforts. Why is that happening?
This one, the current one, is the second largest outbreak, Ebola outbreak, after this one in West Africa. And we need, currently, because we don't have vaccine, we don't have medicines, we need to make sure that we are putting in place all public health measures to stop this outbreak. Yes, the WHO is warning people about first funding, second about the risk of this outbreak to spread to other countries. I think Africa CDC already communicated that we have between 10 to 12 countries at risk.
This is not the first time the continent is dealing with pandemics. What lessons has Africa learned from previous Ebola outbreaks? And why does Africa continue to struggle with surveillance and vaccine development?
This is a complex question. So many questions in one. First, it's not the first Ebola outbreak, yes. And we have today, in terms of human resources, we have the expertise. People, they know Ebola. People, they know what to do to respond to the Ebola outbreak. We have Professor Muyembe. I don't know if in the world there is someone more than Muyembe in terms of knowledge of Ebola. But we have also other issues, like why do we don't have specific vaccine and medicine for this strain, the Budibungyo? I have to say that this strain was discovered 19 years ago. After 19 years, if we still don't have vaccine and medicine, it's because it was in Africa. I can assure you that if Budibungyo was in Europe, in the US, the vaccine will be available. Now what we are doing, we are accelerating with the vaccine. Africa CDC is part of the team that is working on the vaccine, while on the ground, we still continue to implement what we learned from the previous Ebola outbreaks. It means how to implement the public health measures to stop the transmission.
The region most impacted by the Ebola outbreak is very familiar with adversity. Tens of thousands of people in eastern DRC have been displaced by years of violence and conflict. In humanitarian camps where access to clean water or sanitation can be difficult, aid groups warned the virus could spread even more rapidly. CGTN's Joy Kruki Juma reports.
In Bunia, eastern Congo, thousands of displaced families are confronting yet another threat. After years of violence and displacement, residents in this camp are now living under the shadow of Ebola. Families here survive in overcrowded shelters with little clean water, poor sanitation, and almost no medical support. Francine Leve-Janguzi has lived in the camp for more than 8 years. She says authorities tell residents to wash their hands regularly, but there is often no water and no soap available.
I've been here for 8.5 years. Now we are hearing about Ebola. Look at the state of where we are sleeping. We don't have any help whatsoever. We don't have soap or water, yet we are told to wash our hands regularly and be clean. How are we supposed to be clean without soap or water? You see, the taps are dry.
Eastern Congo has endured decades of armed conflict involving multiple militia groups. Many camp residents fled deadly attacks carried out by armed factions operating across Ituri province. Now health officials say the region is facing a dangerous outbreak of the rare Budibungyo strain of Ebola. The virus spreads through contact with bodily fluids from infected people. Inside the camp, volunteers are trying to stop the spread through public awareness campaigns. Naomi Machozi walks through the camp each day with a megaphone, warning residents about prevention measures.
The way the disease emerged compels us to raise awareness so that people don't contract it. We ask them to wash their hands, not to shake hands, and to avoid contact with other people's secretions. That's why we are raising awareness to prevent the worst.
According to the World Health Organization, the outbreak has already led to hundreds of suspected cases and deaths. Residents fear conditions inside the camp could make the disease even harder to contain.
The disease is very frightening because I've learned that there is no cure, which is why it scares me. Our government should do everything possible to find a solution to this disease.
For families already displaced by conflict, the Ebola outbreak has added another layer of fear to daily life in one of the world's most severe humanitarian crises. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Rwanda says it has intensified surveillance and preventive measures along its borders following the Ebola outbreak in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. Authorities say there are currently no Ebola cases in the country, but the movement restrictions and heightened screening are already affecting thousands of traders and transport operators whose businesses depend on daily border crossings. Our correspondent Ethan Tashobia reports from Kigali.
This is a quite unusual sight, but so are the times. The bustling Petit Barriere border crossing between Rubavu in Rwanda and Goma in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo is usually crowded with traders, porters, and commuters. Often described as one of Africa's busiest pedestrian crossings, it's a lifeline for thousands who depend on daily trade.
Before the Ebola outbreak, we crossed the border freely to buy stock, but now movement has reduced, and the goods we are selling were purchased before Ebola. We understand the health concerns, but we are worried about how long this situation will continue because it is affecting our businesses and families.
Business has reduced significantly. Before the Ebola outbreak, we crossed several times a day transporting vegetables, fruits and passengers. But now movement is restricted. Income has dropped and some of our vehicle licenses are expiring while we remain out of work.
Still, authorities insist the restrictions are necessary to protect public health.
These measures are for preventive reasons. There's intense screening and other methods of preparation to be able to prevent the cross of Ebola. So it's important that the country gets ready and all measures have been put in place, be it in all our borders, but also in the health sector. All our health facilities, all our healthcare workers, and the entire system is in place and in sync to be able to prevent the spread of Ebola in Rwanda.
Across Rubavu, caution has kicked in. Public awareness campaigns have become more visible as residents adjust to heightened health precautions.
Business has been greatly affected. We're trying to adapt by changing how we operate. Some customers now order goods remotely, and we deliver through authorized channels. But with third parties involved, you can never be completely sure you will receive your money.
Regional health authorities warn that Eastern DRC's high population mobility and intense cross-border movement continue to pose a risk of transmission. Rwanda finds itself between two neighboring countries where Ebola cases have been reported, the DRC and Uganda. For now, authorities say vigilance remains critical, especially along the busy border crossings that support thousands of livelihoods through daily trade and movement. Ethan Tashobia for CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
Scientists in Uganda are edging closer to a breakthrough that could help reduce the population of malaria-carrying mosquitoes, raising hopes of eventually eliminating the disease. Uganda is one of 5 African countries experiencing growing resistance to malaria drugs. The World Health Organization is urging nations to diversify their treatment and prevention options. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Scientists in Uganda are hoping that what you see here will eventually be a thing of the past. Several types of malaria-spreading mosquitoes exist, and the target is to completely wipe them out and cut disease transmission. Specialists from the Uganda Virus Research Institute are designing tools to explore gene technology. Researchers are reducing the birth rate of malaria-carrying mosquitoes in the lab by developing species that cannot pass the parasite on to humans.
A single mosquito will lay up to 300 eggs each time. It only has to mate once, and then it will bite somebody, develop eggs, and then lay them. So if you can reduce the numbers of eggs they're laying to very few or none, then that means that we can reduce the numbers of mosquitoes that are available to spread that malaria.
The study is undergoing regulatory checks before the field trials begin. Inside these labs, scientists are racing to develop genetically modified mosquitoes designed to stop malaria on its tracks. It's a simple idea. Produce mosquitoes that are unable to produce parasites that cause malaria. It could be a breakthrough in completely wiping out the disease for good. Malaria remains a major public health threat in Africa. The latest malaria report from the WHO shows that there were more than 280 million cases of the disease in 2024. But 95% of all cases and deaths are recorded in Africa.
One of the challenges has been in the testing, because the malaria parasite has also started some antigenic changes, the deletions, the scientists will tell you. We have also had resistance in the chemicals that is impregnated into the nets, as well as the chemicals that we use for indoor residue spraying. So the reversal is not because we have slackened in our pace. The reversal is because of the challenges that we meet along the way with the available public health tools.
Uganda recently started a vaccination drive for children under 5, but uptake remains low. With new tools like the gene drive technology nearing completion, scientists are hopeful this could be a major step in the country's battle to end malaria. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Entebbe, Uganda.
The South African government has warned there will be zero tolerance for lawlessness as tensions over undocumented migration escalate. The country's Justice and Security Coordinating Organ convened in urgent meetings in Pretoria after a surge in protests by anti-illegal migration groups demanding undocumented migrants leave the country. The government says public frustrations must be addressed within the law amid fears the situation could get worse ahead of a planned national shutdown at the end of June. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
The March and March movement, one of the groups driving a recent wave of anti-illegal migration protests, has issued a blunt ultimatum to undocumented foreign nationals in South Africa: leave the country by the 30th of June. The organization is pressing ahead with plans for a national shutdown, despite a high-level government intervention aimed at calming tensions.
It seems like it's a government that doesn't take South Africans seriously. South Africans are saying they have it enough with illegal foreign nationals and they want them removed from this country. That's basically what the South Africans are saying.
Security cluster ministers and senior officials responsible for maintaining law and order met with political parties, civil society groups and NGOs as concerns grow over rising hostility towards migrants. Government acknowledged the constitutional right to take to the streets, but warned against violence and intimidation.
There is a responsibility that we have as a country to ensure that things, even where there's outcry of something, those are done within the law. People's right to march is protected in the Constitution. The freedom of speech is protected by the Constitution. And we wanted to emphasize that, but also emphasized the importance of ensuring that these marches are peaceful.
Anger over illegal migration has been building for years, at times erupting into deadly violence in which migrants have lost their lives, homes and businesses.
I was terrified when I saw a South African paint spraying a foreign immigrant. I said at the end of the day, they're human beings. They have the right, they have a dignity. You have to protect everybody's dignity. We have a responsibility to respect them and treat them and not throw our problems to them.
Many South Africans believe illegal migration is worsening unemployment and contributing to high crime levels. But analysts warn migrants are increasingly being turned into scapegoats for deeper structural failures, from corruption and inequality to collapsing service delivery and chronic unemployment.
The broader institutional problem is that we are shifting the whole debate around politics to make it about immigration, rather than look at why is it that your electricity gets cut off at random times? Why is it that our water is gone for days? Why is it that inequality is worse than it was and unemployment worse than it was for some during the apartheid period?
South Africa has repeatedly stressed that migration itself is not the issue, but that irregular migration and weak regional coordination are placing mounting pressure on the country's systems and resources. Government is developing a framework to address the growing crisis, with another meeting expected ahead of the planned 30th of June shutdown. Julie Shara, CGTN, South Africa.
The first group of Ghanaian nationals have departed South Africa aboard a repatriation flight following growing fears among migrant communities after recent anti-immigrant protests. The voluntary relocation process, which began on Wednesday, included women and children, with Ghanaian authorities saying more evacuations are expected in the coming days. Some citizens say repeated harassment and insecurity influenced their decision to return home. Ghana's High Commissioner to South Africa, Benjamin Kaushi, says the repatriation effort is aimed at easing tensions while maintaining strong diplomatic ties between the two countries.
The demonstrators have said that they want us to work together. How do we work together? Ensuring that those that are undocumented, we are taking them back home. We are ensuring that if we want to work as a committee of nations to achieve much together, the Pan-Africanism that we all talk about, we should allow institutions to work. Once the institutions are working, I don't think we'll find ourselves in this kind of situations whatsoever again.
Ghana is opening its doors wider to the rest of Africa. All African passport holders will now be able to enter the country visa-free. After Benin, the Gambia, Rwanda, and the Seychelles, the move makes Ghana the 5th African country to adopt such a policy. It's been widely welcomed, but as CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra, questions remain about implementation and security.
Thousands of passengers move through Accra International Airport every day, but this number may soon rise in the coming months and years after the government launched its first electronic visa application system, which is free for people holding African passports. The country's president says it's not just a move for Ghana, but for all of Africa.
We're giving practical expression to the long-held aspiration that Africans should be able to move freely within their own continent with dignity, opportunity, and purpose.
The visa-free arrangement took effect on May 25, coinciding with Africa Day celebrations. The government says the policy will promote trade, tourism, and African integration.
Intra-Africa trade is the lowest when compared to the other continents, just around 15%. With this new visa regime opening Ghana up for business, we hope that it will boost trade.
For many Africans who travel to Ghana, they believe the visa-free system is a good idea.
It's going to help, Africans to be together, to be able to enter Ghana without paying any visa fees. So we have been it has been so helpful for all of us. So we are so happy.
But there are concerns that while the policy could boost free movement of people from across Africa, it opens Ghana up to security risks.
Security remains our top priority, and this platform ensures that security is smarter than ever before. Before a traveler even boards a plane, we already know who is coming. We assess the risks early, we identify threats early, and we act early.
Authorities say travelers will continue to go through screening and identification procedures despite the relaxed entry rules. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Since U.S. President Donald Trump came to power last year, scores of immigrants have been deported to so-called third countries as part of his controversial anti-immigrant crackdown. The deportations were facilitated by bilateral deals with the governments of these third countries, many of which are in Africa. A third country is one that the deportees had not lived in prior to arriving in the U.S., so they are in many cases forced into a very unfamiliar cultural environment. The latest African country to receive deportees was Sierra Leone, but others such as Ghana, South Sudan, and the DRC have already welcomed a significant number, with more expected. More on this from our correspondent Daniel Arap Moy.
Just days ago, a flight carrying several deported immigrants from the United States landed in Sierra Leone. It came as part of a deal the government in Freetown made with the Trump administration under its controversial immigration strategy. But most of the people on board were not citizens of Sierra Leone. They were nationals of Ghana, Guinea, Nigeria, and Senegal. Under Sierra Leone's specific terms, they negotiated to only accept immigrants from West African nations. The deal is part of an aggressive, expanding diplomatic push by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Other African countries that have also agreed to accept U.S. deportees are Ghana, Uganda, Eswatini, DRC, and South Sudan. Much of the detail from the agreements remains unclear. However, Sierra Leone's arrangement is supported by a $1.5 million grant from the U.S. government. The DRC signed a migration cooperation framework to accept an undisclosed number of third-country migrants, with the first deportation flights landing in April 2026. The incentive structure is tied heavily to geopolitics and natural resources. Alongside the deal, the U.S. signed agreements giving it preferred trade access to the DRC's vast reserves of critical minerals like cobalt, lithium, and copper. The U.S. also acted as a key mediator in brokering a diplomatic peace agreement between the DRC and Rwanda over eastern border conflicts. Rwanda officially agreed to receive up to 250 third-country deportees from the U.S. The deal explicitly excludes high-risk categories such as child sex offenders. It also stipulates that individuals cannot serve out remaining U.S. prison sentences on Rwandan soil. Their terms must be fully completed before transfer. Beyond direct monetary payouts, a broader web of incentives like visa sanction relief applies to other signatory nations such as Ghana, Uganda, and South Sudan. Immigration lawyers say they estimate between 8,000 and 15,000 people have already been flown to third countries, leaving thousands of families stranded in places they are thoroughly unfamiliar with. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Muslim faithfuls the world over are celebrating Eid al-Adha, also known as the Festival of Sacrifice. In Mali, where the festival is known as Tabaski, families observe the tradition of sacrificing livestock. However, this year, insecurity has driven up prices at livestock markets in the capital, Bamako. Mamadou Tapili reports.
In Bamako, preparation for Eid al-Adha, known locally as Tabaski, are intensifying. It comes as the Malian government has officially launched a hugely welcome sheep sales promotion, aimed at helping families purchase livestock at more affordable prices amid rising living costs. Sheep pens across the capital are now attracting a growing number of buyers, with traders transporting animals from different regions of the country to meet the expected demand. But many residents say purchasing a sheep this year still remain financially challenging.
Honestly, things are not going well. We can no longer afford to buy sheep because they are far too expensive. Even today, I came to buy one, but the seller is asking for $346. I offered $240, and he still refuses to sell it to me. I even raised my offer to $267, but he still refuses. Frankly, it's difficult.
Some traders say insecurity and transport disruption along certain routes are affecting the movement of animals toward Bamako.
In reality, livestock is expensive and people do not have enough money. When customers come to buy and we tell them the prices, they are often shocked. When we purchase livestock at a certain price, it becomes difficult to resell it for less. Even animal feed prices have increased sharply. Otherwise, we would like to lower the prices, but the current situation leaves us with little choice.
Transporters moving livestock from rural areas to Bamako also say insecurity and fuel shortage are disrupting commercial activity and increasing operational costs.
The difficulties we are facing today are mainly related to transportation, the shortage of diesel fuel and insecurity on the roads. Truck owners are afraid and refuse to send their vehicles because they fear they could be banned. And that creates fear everywhere. This situation has increased transportation costs.
Economists and livestock sector representatives say Tabaski generates significant economic activity every year, particularly for rural communities that depend heavily on animal husbandry.
The economic consequences of the crisis are that livestock prices have risen significantly, while purchasing power has not kept pace, resulting in financial losses. On the social level, there is usually a strong dynamic during festive periods, when people gather and many leave the cities to return to rural areas. This time of major reunions has been disrupted, and roads have also become less practicable.
For many households in Bamako, preparation for Tabaski now depend largely on purchasing power, as families balance the religious traditions with the rising daily expenses. Mamadou Tapili, CGTN, Bamako.
In Somalia, livestock markets have been seeing a surge in activity ahead of Eid al-Adha. Mohamed Kaye visited one of these markets in Mogadishu and reports.
At this livestock market in Somali capital Mogadishu, traders are racing against time to maximize profits ahead of Eid al-Adha as demand for animals continue to rise. Traders like Abdullahi Gure say recent rainfall in some parts of the country has slightly improved livestock supply, raising hopes for even better market conditions in the coming weeks.
We are thankful that we received some rain following the severe drought that has improved the health of the livestock, slightly increasing their price value. It could have been better if we stepped up exports, which will boost both traders here and the nomadic communities supplying.
A goat can now sell for between $150 to $250. But just a few months ago, traders say the situation was very different as the current droughts reduced livestock supply at the market. According to Ambiya Hussein, the prolonged dry conditions has severely affected both traders and the herders.
We now sell at $280, and on the lower side, it's $180 and $150. But before, we would sell at $110 to as low as $80.
The weakening of the Somali currency and its rejection by some businesses as mode of payment is creating additional challenges for traders and customers in the market.
We used to go to nomadic communities and buy from them using Somali currency, but now they have rejected opting for USD via mobile money payment. We are appealing to the authorities to intervene in restoring the dignity of our local Somali currency.
As business gradually improves, traders remain hopeful for better conditions, while also calling on authorities and relevant institutions to address the economic challenges affecting the livestock trade. Hamid Kahir, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, welcome into Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta. Let's get your sports segment going with the FIFA World Cup news, which is just over 2 weeks away now. Algeria have not yet announced their 26-man squad for the tournament, but clear signs are emerging regarding the makeup of Vladimir Petkovic's squad. Goalkeeper